John, your mic.
This is the Darien Board of Education Finance Committee meeting Thursday, October 19th, 2023. It's about 8 a.m. and I believe our next meeting is November 16th. So the agenda today, the first item is review September 2023 financial report. Mr. Rubin.
So this is the financial report through September. We are showing a projected deficit currently of $801,006. Of this projected deficit, $786,293 is attributed to special education. So the changes from the August report are a deficit of $195,336. Going through those, we did have some salary savings to two paraprofessional positions at the high school, which saved about $3,900. Parking fee revenue did come in slightly higher than projected at $490. Again, it's not a change in the price point that we charge, but it's really a product of when the kids actually get their licenses and are able to get a parking permit. Salary savings for the new Oxford assistant principal based on the start date, that was $18,000. We did have positive turnover savings from a middle school math position of $23,568. A small amount of savings and unaffiliated salary savings of $3,800. We did have a deficit in consult services in special education for 4 additional RBT support staff, which bring the total to 11. So that's $331,520 to the negative. We did have 2 additional settlements, which is a negative $64,190. We did have a change in a placement, which is a positive to a tuition line item of $86,000. Based on the increase in expenditures, we are projecting additional $61,512 in excess cost revenue. We are still assuming the reimbursement rate of 70% and the threshold of $107,000. We should get the threshold setting any time now, and then the reimbursement rate we won't really know until February. And then we had sewer savings of just over $2,600, and that's really a product of consumption. So the general education RCs are a negative 14,713. They did improve by just over 52,000 from the previous month. I would anticipate by the time we do the October report, the general education RCs will turn positive. And we can go over why that will be shortly. And then the special education RCs are a negative 786,293 to get you to that deficit of $801,000. The only change in RC1 is the positive 3955 in salary savings for the delayed start in the testing center paraprofessional and the science paraprofessional. No change in RC3, 7 homes. The change in RC8 is the increased salary savings due to the delayed start in the new assistant principal. That assistant principal has started, so that number is locked in. Turnover savings has fallen short by $345,000. We do still have 4 positions to fill. The library media specialist at the high school, we have a special education teacher at the middle school, and then world language positions at Tokenie and Ox Ridge. The reason why I expect the general education RCs to turn positive in the next month is the 2 world language positions are at the top end of the scale, and we will have salary savings. So even if and when they are filled at the top end of the scale, we won't have turnover savings, but we'll have salary savings. And so in the next month, we'll assume that. So it won't turn positive by a significant amount, but we would assume it would turn positive by a slight amount. Overall, we've had 62 teachers leave, and the savings have been about $4,300 per teacher. 7 administrators leave, with average savings of just over $6,300. No change in RC19, no change in RC23. Moving to RC24, special education, consult services do show a projected deficit of $443,000. We do have 11 contracted RBT support staff in place. That is driving the deficit in consult services. Tuition is forecasted at a deficit of just over $600,000. As we mentioned in the previous meeting, the new legislation extending the age of service to 22 is driving about 1/3 of that deficit, $220,000. And then we've had a couple IEP placement changes and some unilateral placements as well. Again, excess cost is still budgeted at $2.6 million, and we are assuming the 70%. The highest we could get is 85%, though I will say it's very unlikely we will get 85%. And then once we know the reimbursement rate, we will make those changes as they call for. RC25 health insurance is a positive balance of $104,000. This is due to census changes. the under-enrolled elementary section, special education class being covered by teacher overages, and then 2 instructional paras. RC 26, there's no change, and RC 27. no change.
Okay, questions?
I mean.
Can make sure you get your mic too.
Oh, so my question is about those RBT support staff, the 4 new ones. Is that not something that could have been, I know, and I know we can't identify, but are those new IEPs, or is that something that was, it just seems that in the first 6 weeks of school that all of a sudden we have these 4 new people that we
do.
need.
So my understanding, 2 of those 4 will allow Shirley to return the ELP paras that she essentially borrowed in the beginning of the year back to ELP. And then eventually she'll have to find 2 more to return. And then some of them are new IEP placements. But the specific details I have to defer to Shirley.
Okay, I guess, okay. It seems like there's a lot of staff that we didn't know we needed. And I'm wondering if there's a way to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future.
Certainly from what we know we need, at the time, we have to budget for those things, but in this case, this is coming to an IEP process.
And I understand it's fluid, but it just seems like a significant change.
I would actually argue that this is not a surprise at all. I think that all during last year, we heard repeatedly at the board table that students were not getting the services that they need, that staffing shortages were impacting delivery of services. So I think this is exactly what should have been predicted, that we would have a deficit and that we would have people, 7 unilateral placements. Rich, you put that there were 2 more. So does that bring our total to 9 since the start of the year?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not surprising to me at all, that we have a rise in unilateral placements where parents are just saying, you can't educate my child, they're not getting what they need. Like, we were literally told this at multiple board meetings last year. I'm happy to see that we're starting to report the unilateral things. I think I mentioned that the last one, but as they continue, I would actually be interested to know how many previous unilateral placements we have, because I know that a lot of times those agreements can span several years. So how many total are on the DPS books would be interesting to know. And I think that can help us classify a little bit too, if there is a significant increase in this year. And is that related to a lack of services last year? I think that some of the points that were made before, this is, a bigger conversation. Unfortunately, this is the second subcommittee meeting in a row where we're talking about major special education costs. And unfortunately, Shirley's not here. What I want to ensure happens is that this conversation happens with Shirley at the full board table so that we can suss it out, because we are, quickly approaching $1 million. Last year, we returned, somewhere in the neighborhood of $800,000 of ECR. And now we're facing almost that same amount in a deficit. So I think there are a lot of conversations that need to happen. And unfortunately, I'm not surprised.
I appreciate your comments about not being surprised. I just want to be careful about making assumptions. So can you just talk about what the definition of a unilateral placement is, Dr. Adley?
Yeah, it's where a parent would potentially disagree with the school system in terms of their education they're receiving, and that independent of the IEP, they go places they place their student at an outplacement.
Okay.
And therefore we have to have discussions about the relevancy of that. Do we agree with it, or do we not agree with it? And often that will end up in a settlement. It's not unusual for that to end up in a settlement agreement.
Okay, so this is not a final mark in this. And again, I don't want to get into personally identifiable information here, but this is not by any means a final number on a number of different fronts. So let's just be careful. I understand your lack of surprise, and I appreciate that, but I also don't want to set a mark that this is the final number. So I think, we're looking at our vice chair at the board level. I think your requests for additional information are totally valid. And again, without touching upon what we can, personally identifiable information at a future board meeting, maybe we can have this covered. And there might be more information. The settlement process, typical, how many months are you talking about, or is that a year issue?
That's just a rule. that's just sort of like a rolling issue.
Yeah.
It can take a significant amount of time, to be honest with you, or a short amount. They're all different, and I'll just be cautious of like there's more to this, so to speak, and because a unilateral placement doesn't mean that the school system can't educate that child. It means, in the opinion of the parents, that there's a difference of. Now, I'm not, but I just want to make sure that
We're talking in generalities,
Yes.
not these,
Yeah.
not these particular cases.
When we have this conversation with the full board, I think it's important to understand where those unilateral placements are. Are they all at the elementary level? Are they spread across divisions? Are they because of dyslexia? You know, not all, but is there a pocket? Is there a cohort that we could potentially be educating better in our own district to avoid those unilateral outplacements?
Yeah, I think that's a really important consideration, Sarah. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's worthy of more of a discussion. Dennis, did you want to add something?
You know, I just want to build on, I kind of want to piggyback both Sarah and Katie's points is with these unilateral placements that were at the beginning of the year, was this known going into last year? I mean, let me rephrase point. I mean, maybe it was known in June or, May or June after our budgets were passed, but can we get a little notification of this, or does it just happen starting in September? It seems awfully fast to have it happen that quickly.
the ones that the special education needs that we know about, whether unilateral placements or otherwise, were budgeted for, and these are ones that have subsequently taken place.
They don't
Budgeted.
happen post-May.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said
They all happen
post-May.
Post-May.
Okay,
Post-May, okay.
okay,
And I would
perfect.
expect some shifts from May until
Yeah.
September.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
but-
typically every year we do have changes, whether it's unilateral placements or IEP placements. For the most part, like the ones coming in and the ones going out, roughly balanced. It's not like quite the significant. We just happen to have more going the other way than coming in at this point in time.
So the net number is more going out this year
Correct. So,
than
like, if we
previous
look at-
years.
If
Yeah,
we look at previous years, we did have unknown ones going out, but we also had either students who left the district, who moved away, or we had IEP placements that changed. And so when you look at it as a whole, there really wasn't any change. This year, we just have more going out as opposed to changes or going in.
since May.
Since May, yeah.
Okay, no, this is good conversation and sounds like some more details warranted, which we're not going to cover today, though. But that was, I think, one of the major questions I had. Any other questions? I guess just the personnel, RC 18, Rich, when you look at the average savings, you outlined 62 teachers at 4,300. What was the budgeted amount on each of these categories?
So we did, I believe it was about 40 teachers. So typically what we look at is what's our total pool of teachers? And then we strip out the ones who left either and got replaced at the same or higher.
Right,
So we were anticipating over $10,000 per teacher.
okay,
So right now of the 62, I believe we have about 18 who were hired either at the same or more
Okay.
than those who left. The difference really is we're not really seeing the savings where somebody left, let's say at 110,000, like you're hiring them at 60 or 65,000. The people who are leaving, let's say at 100,000, we're getting replaced at like 90 or 95,000. So it's shrinking that average savings.
so the average savings is basically 40% of what was anticipated is another way. And same thing, is that the same case with the administrator turnover savings?
Typically, we don't budget for administrator turnover savings as it's unusual to see a large number of administrators leave. In this case, it was mostly the assistant principals, which are really like your newer administrators. So that's why we've seen some savings.
Okay, and then, actually, I'm sorry, just one back to RC 24. You said the 85% is not likely. We're budgeting at 70%. Sounds like, though, the anticipation comes somewhere in the middle.
So last year we got just shy of 80%.
Okay,
Historically, the average has been around before they went to this tiering system has been around 75%. So there's going to be two factors that'll be in play. One is what is the threshold set at? So we budgeted 107. If you recall last year, the threshold ended up being a lot lower than we anticipated. So if it's a lot lower, then we'll net a lot of money. If it's higher or roughly the same, you won't. And then the other big one is what is the reimbursement rate going to be? And so the reimbursement rate isn't going to be determined by the state until all the districts in Connecticut submit their filings. And then they're going to see, okay, well, how much do we have in the pot to release? Is it enough to meet these tierings? And if it's not, then they're going to proportionally reduce all three tiers.
But they do that twice a year, correct?
Yeah, so we'll submit once in December 1st and
Okay.
then once March 5th.
So the threshold gets set next
So the
month.
threshold will get set, actually, it's in October, so any day
Okay.
now. And
And
then
then-
the reimbursement rate won't get set, the initial reimbursement rate won't get set until February, because that's when they
Right.
send out the first installment of excess cost, and then there'll be a small adjustment in May when they send out the final.
Okay, so again, multiple steps, multiple variables. Any insight on where the threshold's headed this year? There's really no.
Not yet. My guess is we're gonna be a lot closer than we were in the past.
Okay.
In the past, we had that issue with some of the federal grants.
Yeah.
That caused us to be a lot lower. We don't really have that issue anymore because really all the ESSER grants for the most part have been spent down. So I would expect our threshold to be relatively in line. So it's really going to come down to the reimbursement.
Okay, all right. So again, this line item's got multiple three-dimensional variables going, if I could put it that way. So we'll stay tuned. Any other questions on any of the other line items? Dennis, you good? All right, thank you. So the second item is the budget transfers.
So we're recommending two transfers for approval. The first is to move $256,030 from the projected ECR fund to the tuition account. The projected additional ECR money is really related to those tuition expenditures that we accounted for in the deficit. I will also say, because we go against a revised budget, this will also bring a little more clarity when you look at the 25 budget in terms of an apples to apples comparison. And then the second is $15,254 from the health insurance account to the tuition line item. This really is savings associated with the special education staff and census changes. And so this will allow us to true up some of those costs of tuition.
Okay, I would recommend that the board approves those transfers.
I'm fine with it.
Everybody in agreement? Okay, perfect. Last item on the agenda is public comment.
Good morning. If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium or use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
No one in the public? All right, so could I get a motion to adjourn? Second, thank